The Republican presidential running mate is announced.
He is smart and he can articulate the Make America Great agenda as well as anybody.
Just days after a shooter tried to kill Donald Trump.
They tried to assassinate him, and he's still coming back fighting.
Investigators trying to find out why the gunman opened fire and how he managed to avoid security.
We're like, hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle.
This is CBS News Bay Area with Elizabeth Cook.
Republicans have set their ticket. Former President Donald Trump picked Ohio Senator JD Vance as his running mate. And the news broke at the Republican National Convention today, all under the cloud of the shooting over the weekend. Now, JD Vance is a senator from Ohio, but he used to call the Bay Area home. He lived in San Francisco after graduating from Yale, and he worked as a venture capitalist and has ties to former PayPal CEO and Republican donor Peter Thiel. Now, of course, security is top of mind at the Republican convention just 2 days after the shooting at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania. California is sending 61 officers to help out. Ann Makovic is in the newsroom for us with the very latest on the investigation.
And we're still waiting to hear more about what motivated the 20-year-old shooter. The FBI is investigating this as an assassination attempt and a potential case of domestic terrorism. And another investigation is focused on the security failures at the event that allowed this to happen. Former President Trump, of course, was shot and injured on Saturday night in a shooting that also killed a spectator and critically injured 2 others. The former president could be seen touching his ear before he was shielded by the Secret Service and whisked off stage and into an SUV. Those shots came from a roof outside of the security perimeter, where the shooter was able to fire off 8 rounds. Secret Service snipers then shot and killed him. The local sheriff confirming that an armed officer was hoisted onto the roof of that building, but fell off when the shooter pointed his rifle in that officer's direction. That is when police say the gunman turned around and opened fire into the crowd. The attack has put
Unfortunately, we will see something happen again, whether it's, a presidential rally or it's a big venue like Las Vegas. We always try to learn what did we do wrong and how can we prevent it from happening. And I think what you're going to find is elevated positions are going to be extremely scrutinized from here on out.
Well, former President Trump is not currently scheduled to speak at the convention today. His main acceptance speech is set for Thursday. He says his speech has been completely rewritten. The new version is said to be focusing on reuniting the country. President Biden is continuing to urge Americans to reject politically motivated violence. He is set to do an interview airing tonight. We'll be covering that, Liz.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if both, the current president and former President Trump both calling to calm down the rhetoric, to, turn down the volume, so to speak. It'll be interesting to see if that actually happens, because so far in the last, 72 hours, that doesn't seem to be happening.
One could only hope.
Yeah, certainly has changed the temperature so far. Thank you, Ann. Now, Oakland faith leaders condemned this weekend's political violence. Our Daw Lynn reports from Acts Full Gospel Church, where they were praying for peace.
A wonderful counselor.
At Acts Full Gospel Church in East Oakland, every Sunday service starts with upbeat music, energy, and passion. On this Sunday, Bishop Bob Jackson said a few more prayers for Donald Trump and those killed and injured in the shooting.
Jesus, we pray for those that were injured, the one that was killed, Lord. We pray for their families today, Lord.
Church member Salika Thomas says she too prayed for the victims.
It was very evil what that person had did, and it was very demonic. That was very demonic behavior.
She understands the pain of losing a loved one. Someone shot and killed her sister in Oakland 6 years ago. She's now helping to raise her nephew.
Be a role model to my nephew. It's not that many role models out here, so I have to teach him right from wrong and bring him to church, make sure that he goes every Sunday with me.
She and many churchgoers say the assassination attempt is the result of division and hate.
We are so divided. I'm not even sure that we all are going to ever agree, but one thing we can do is that we can be courteous to one another, we can respect each other's ideas, and we can try to move forward because we all have to live in this country together.
If you didn't like the man or didn't like what he was saying or whatever else, you just don't vote for him.
Bishop Bob says the church is apolitical, and no matter how people feel about Trump, violence is wrong.
I think this nation needs to get back to God so we can have some godly principles, godly standards, and people can have a love for each other instead of the hate that we see in this country now.
For Salika, she's getting into politics and running for the at-large city council seat in Oakland to stop the violence locally and hopefully restore some civility.
We're going to make Oakland great.
Despite the calls for peace, the political divide seems to be getting deeper and deeper.
You are 100% evil. You are 100%
Still ahead, how a gathering place for conservatives became the scene of a shouting match on an East Bay overpass. Plus, we'll ask a political analyst how the shooting will impact the presidential race and how the Trump-Vance ticket stacks up against Biden and Harris.
KPIX awarded the Emmy for overall news excellence.
Today in Milwaukee, delegates made Trump's presidential nomination official. But as Republicans celebrate inside the convention, there are protesters outside. Thousands of people marched down the streets. They said they are focused on issues like immigration and reproductive rights. And the political divide was on full display on a freeway overpass in Lafayette yesterday. Our John Ramos shows us how tempers continue to flare despite calls to lower the temperature.
This is the Curtola Overpass in Lafayette, and since 9/11, it's become a kind of gathering place for conservatives to express their views. But on this day, it's also an example of how divided this nation has become.
We believe in America. We believe we have a country to save. The flags are upside down because we're a nation in distress. This is a grievous time. I'm not being quiet. I'm not going away. We're not going away.
Lisa Disbrow put out a call for fellow Trump supporters to meet at the overpass. She's done it many times, and it's become a familiar sight for drivers on Highway 24. There was nothing inflammatory about the day's message, but it was enough to draw a pretty extreme response from some people.
F you, get off this overpass, you racist. Your kind is not allowed up here. You come up here all the time. No one stands with you, you racist. What are you gonna do with this video?
You are 100% evil. You are 100% You are 100% terrorist traitors to this country, just like him. And God damn you to burn in hell, death. You will burn in hell. I'm sorry that the guy was an inch off.
That's pretty much what political debate in America has become.
I think what has happened is that our people don't know their own American constitutional rights. They don't know. They don't know they have free speech.
It's an assault, if nothing else. And we shouldn't have to do that. We have mostly older ladies up here waving flags. Is that really warrant the violence that's going on and the heat?
Al Norman doesn't trust the government and believes there were larger, sinister forces behind the attack on Trump. He says it feels like conservatives are losing their right to free speech, and that was only bolstered when a Caltrans truck showed up. Lisa says they've been kicked off the overpass 6 times now. And with several media members recording the exchange, she urged her friends to make a stand. Suddenly, without explanation, the Caltrans truck left.
They don't want the media! Woo!
Why do you think they just left?
They don't want you recording this. Too many eyes. The eyes are on them. Today was the Alamo. Woo!
But despite references to the Alamo, there are Trump supporters who don't think politics should be a fight to the death. Joe Mueller was disturbed by what she saw on Saturday.
Were you surprised that would happen? That it could go that far?
I probably was, yeah. Because if he hadn't turned his head just that little fraction, he'd be dead now. I think it'd be really hard on all of us. Yeah, I think that would be, a lot of people would be very unhappy about that, and it would not be good.
A little scary?
Very scary. Yeah, I think it's scary times we're living in.
It's scary because it feels like the nation has stepped over a threshold.
Whoa! We almost got you guys last night!
And no one on either side is willing to take a step back.
Well, joining me now is political analyst Dr. Nolan Higdon, a professor of history and media studies at Cal State East Bay. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to talk about what happened over the weekend in just a minute, but I want to talk about what the news of the day. Trump's VP pick, JD Vance, someone who had been highly critical of Trump in the past. Vance also has ties to wealthy donors here in Silicon Valley. What do you make of this pick?
I think it makes sense in a lot of ways for what Trump is trying to do. JD Vance was at one point a CNN contributor, so he has his media bona fides, which are important to Trump. He published a very popular book. And I think also importantly, there's been so much discussion about age in this election. He's young. He's 39 years old. So people can look within the conservative movement can look at voting for the Trump-Vance ticket as a way to further MAGA into the future. Maybe Vance is going to carry that mantle.
So let's get to the events that happened over the weekend. Still really hard to watch the divide and the rhetoric that's happening right now between the two political parties. But how does the shooting at the Trump rally impact the presidential campaigns on both sides moving forward? Is this going to give a boost to Trump's campaign, do you think?
I think ultimately Trump is the biggest benefactor, politically speaking, from what happened. Obviously, nobody wants to take a bullet or be near a bullet, but politically speaking, he's the most gets the most benefit from it. Biden, though, does get a little bit of a benefit. The 2 weeks prior to that shooting, the media attention was focused on Biden's cognitive abilities and whether or not he should step down. And it looks like this shooting has tempered some of those discussions. But Trump really looks like the one who's benefiting from this. Coming out of that, he looks like someone who's projecting strength. His allies are able to use that shooting as an indictment of all Democrats, as if somehow all Democrats are responsible for it. And historically, we've seen that when presidents do get their life threatened in an assassination attempt, they tend to get a bump in the polls. And for Trump, that's important. Candidates also get a bump in the polls during convention week, which Trump is having. And one of the biggest threats against Trump's candidacy were his trials, and another one was just thrown out today. So I think everything seems to be going in Trump's direction in the last couple of weeks.
That's right. That was another big story that happened today that's sort of been trumped, pun intended, by the other things that are happening. A federal judge dismissed the classified documents case against Donald Trump, saying the appointment of the special counsel Jack Smith violated the Constitution. What impact, if any, will this have on his campaign? I mean, Jack Smith and his team said that they will appeal this, but, you know, this new trial probably isn't going to happen before the election, right?
Correct. And I think this is where the Biden and the Democrats have really been hurt. It seems like their whole game plan was to run on Biden beat Trump once, let him do it again. And they believed that the return of Trump to national politics, coupled with his trials, would ultimately turn off a lot of voters. Well, the question about Biden's ability to beat Trump has really been raised in the 2 weeks prior to the shooting. And now a lot of those trials seem not to be as important of an issue. Even his sentencing has now been pushed back as well. So I think a lot of the Democrats' game plan for 2024 has been taken out from under them in the last couple of months.
I want to talk a little bit about the historical perspective of what's happened over the past 3 days. It's been 43 years since a president or presidential candidate was hurt in an assassination attempt, but political violence in this country is not that unusual. I mean, even here in the Bay Area, there was an attack on Paul Pelosi. That was 2 years ago. Assassinations of Harvey Milk, George Moscone in 1978, and the attempted assassination of Gerald Ford in San Francisco back in 1975. Historically, have those events created more of a divide among the parties? And do you think that we're seeing it now on an extreme level, but do you think that that's going to continue? Or do you think that it might, in fact, unify both parties? I mean, that's what the candidates are calling for, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, historically, these attempts have largely been unifying. That is to say, the country unifies against the target. The overwhelming majority of the country, I think, recognizes that violence is antithetical to democracy. The whole concept of democracy is we decide things peacefully through the ballot process or electoral process, legislative process. But violence is antithetical to that. But having said that, in the last decade or so, these acts of political violence, some of which you've named there, have really been used to feed into the deep polarization. So even after the shooting of Trump, you could go online and immediately, even though there was little to no evidence of what had happened yet, you could see, folks on the left arguing it was a false flag or Putin might be involved, and then those on the right saying it was government orchestrated, trying to kill Trump. When there was simply no evidence to back up any of those claims. And so I think that we are a different culture now, and we react differently to these type of events than we might have, say, in the 1970s.
Right. All right, Dr. Nolan Higdon with Cal State East Bay. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And stay tuned to CBS News 24/7 for the very latest on the attempted assassination. And a programming note, there will be no 7 p.m. newscast tonight due to coverage of the Republican convention.